What would you do if the people you trusted most, your own family, decided that your future was worth less than a pretentious, money-sucking pipe dream? How do you look a mother and father in the eye after they've signed away your security to fuel their golden child's vanity project? Does blood really run thicker than $100,000 in student debt? These are the questions that used to keep me awake, staring into the dark, watching the shadows of my brother's foolish ambition dance on the ceiling. But now, I sleep just fine. Now, I have my answers. If you want to know how a forgotten sister became the CEO who crushed her brother's woke coffee empire, you've come to the right place. Before we dive into the deep end of familial betrayal and sweet surgical revenge, do me a favor. If you're here for the truth that people keep behind closed doors, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to ring the bell so you never miss a story of when reality bites back. Trust me, you'll want to see how this one ends. My name is Jenna. I was 28 years old and my life was a meticulously planned spreadsheet. Every line item had a purpose: work, save, pay down the crushing student loans, eventually put a down payment on a modest little condo. The $100,000 inheritance from my grandmother, my brilliant, level-headed Nana, was the keystone of that entire structure. It wasn't a windfall, it was a bridge to solvency. It was my freedom. Then came Ethan, the golden child. My older brother, 32, who had floated through life on a cloud of unearned confidence and parental adoration. Ethan, the creative thinker, the visionary. He had no real job, no savings, and crucially, no idea about business. But he did have an idea: the Conscious Cup. A coffee shop that was less about coffee and more about social commentary. It's more than coffee, Jen. It's a movement, he declared at a tense, awkward family dinner, waving his hands dramatically. We're sourcing ethically challenged beans from a single remote valley, and the entire aesthetic will challenge the capitalistic paradigm. I remember the look on his face, smug and self-satisfied. He spoke in buzzwords, a torrent of philosophical nonsense that apparently only my parents understood. They hung on his every word, their eyes shining with pride for their pioneer son. I, the practical, spreadsheet-obsessed daughter, was the invisible one. The actual theft wasn't a shadowy transaction. It was a brightly lit, legally binding conversation in my parents' living room. Ethan needed $100,000, the full exact amount of my inheritance, to start his movement. He didn't ask me. He went straight to Mom and Dad, the executors of the trust, and convinced them it was a sound investment in his vision. "Jenna, you're so good with money. You can save up again," my mother had said, her voice laced with that familiar, patronizing softness reserved for me. "This is a legacy project for Ethan. You don't need a condo right now. You need to support your brother's purpose." My father, the man who had always preached fiscal responsibility, simply nodded, his eyes fixed on Ethan, who was already sketching his logo, a minimalist fist holding a coffee bean, on a napkin. I remember the silence that followed. It wasn't the silence of contemplation, but the thick, suffocating quiet of a verdict. The $100,000 meant for my future was transferred to the Conscious Cup LLC within the week. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat there, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles were white, and looked from their faces, three people who had just stripped me bare, to the window. The outside world looked normal. That was the most shocking part. They called it investing in a vision. I called it grand larceny, I whispered to myself years later, watching the facade crumble. They thought they had crippled me. They thought they had ensured my subservience. They were right about one thing. I am practical, and that practicality, that cold, hard reality they dismissed, was about to become the hammer that would shatter Ethan's golden glass house. I didn't just want my money back. I wanted his future, and I knew exactly how to take it. The game had begun. My grandmother's money, the money that smelled of pine needles and old book paper, the scent of safety, was now funding a cafe named after a pretentious ideological trend. 2 years. That's how long it took for the bitterness to settle into my bones, a kind of cold financial arthritis. I was still drowning in student loan debt, working 2 jobs, watching my peers move on, move up, while I was structurally anchored by a decision made by 3 people who loved their vanity project more than my stability. And the worst part? My parents doubled down. They didn't just let Ethan take the money. They became his enablers. They were the executive producers of his slow-motion train wreck. I remember watching Ethan during the grand opening of the Conscious Cup. The place was a shrine to performative activism. The menu boards were written in an illegible artistic script. The prices? Astronomical. A small black coffee, which he called the decolonized blend, cost $6. $6 for a tiny cup of lukewarm justice. The entire space was intentionally uncomfortable. No Wi-Fi, hard wooden stools, and walls covered in murals of abstract societal struggles. It was designed to repel anyone who just wanted a decent cup of coffee and a moment of peace. My parents were beaming. "Isn't he a visionary, Jenna?" My mother had sighed, clutching a lukewarm, ethically challenged latte. "He's making people think." I was thinking, all right. I was thinking about the rent payment I was late on. The business was, predictably, a disaster. Ethan had the vision, but no one had taught him how to order supplies, manage payroll, or, make good coffee. They were losing money every day. But did my parents care? No. Every month, they'd inject another $5,000, another $10,000. It wasn't profit. It was life support for Ethan's ego. "We're investing in the long-term cultural capital," my father would drone, repeating the empty phrases Ethan fed him. He never once asked if I was okay. Never offered me a penny to help chip away at my loans. Then came the ultimate humiliation. I needed cash. I had an emergency car repair, and my savings account was just a sad, lonely number. I swallowed my pride, that thick, metallic taste, and went to Ethan. I asked for my old job back. Not the $100,000, just a few shifts a week to run the register. He actually considered it a favor to me. "It'll be good for you, Jen," he'd said, leaning back in his manager's chair, which he only used for posing. "It'll expose you to real-world, conscious transactions. I'll start you at minimum wage." So, there I was, the girl whose inheritance paid for the espresso machine, standing behind the counter, serving overpriced disappointment to exactly 3 customers an hour. The public shaming was a new low. One Tuesday morning, a few weeks in, I was ringing up an ironically named anti-imperialist muffin when Mom walked in with one of her socialite friends, Brenda. "Look, Brenda, that's my Jenna," Mom chirped, pointing at me like I was a novelty piece. "She's working here, helping Ethan with his wonderful business. She's not quite the visionary that Ethan is, but she's very dependable with the numbers." Dependable with the numbers. A polite way of saying boring and replaceable. Brenda leaned in, peering at my name tag. "Oh, that's sweet. At least someone in the family has their feet on the ground, dear. Though, darling, why isn't she managing the finances? Seems like a better fit for her skills." My mother laughed, a dismissive, airy sound. "Oh, Ethan handles the vision. Jenna is just better suited for the routine. She doesn't really get the concept." I felt the blood rush from my face. My hands, sticky with muffin crumbs, were shaking. I wanted to leap over the counter, grab my mother's shoulders, and shake the blind, self-serving adoration out of her. I was working for the man who stole my future, and they were treating my minimum wage job as a form of moral rehabilitation. A favor. They couldn't see the irony. They couldn't see the knife they kept twisting. They were so blinded by Ethan's narrative that they had made me the responsible one, the family's shameful little secret. $100,000 pays for the building, but minimum wage pays for my gas, I thought, the bitterness turning into a hard knot of resolve. This is not who I am. My soul was screaming. I looked at Ethan, busy fiddling with a display of upcycled mugs, completely oblivious to the venom he was spraying. He was arrogant, entitled, and completely out of touch. He thought he was untouchable because he was the family's preferred narrative. That day, something snapped. It wasn't the loss of the money that hurt most. It was the public, consistent dismissal of my entire worth. They saw me as a dependable accessory to Ethan's failure. I decided then and there that I would stop being dependable. I would become indispensable, but not to them, to myself. I would find a way to make them regret every word, every dollar, every minute they invested in his grand illusion. I just needed the right trigger. I just needed them to push me one more time. And they would. Oh, they absolutely would. The atmosphere at the Conscious Cup was turning toxic, smelling less like fair trade coffee and more like desperation. Ethan was constantly stressed, snapping at the 2 actual employees who did all the work, myself included. The trickle of customers had become a drought, but my family was still in denial, still playing the role of benevolent patrons. I had been secretly applying for better opportunities. I'd been working for years in digital operations, building a reputation as someone who could take chaos and turn it into profit. Then I got the call. A massive tech company was offering me a junior management position, a real ladder, a real salary, and a full tuition reimbursement for an executive training course. It was everything I'd been working toward. My true ticket out of debt and out of this suffocating family dynamic. But there was a catch. I needed $3,000 upfront for the intensive 2-week training program, a non-negotiable prerequisite, and the tuition reimbursement wouldn't kick in until after the course finished. $3,000. It was a terrifyingly small amount compared to the $100,000 Ethan had blown, yet it felt like a canyon I couldn't cross. My emergency fund was gone thanks to the car repair and the minimum wage checks from the Conscious Cup. I knew I shouldn't ask. I knew what the answer would be. But this was my life. This was the moment I got to prove my worth outside of their warped reality. I had to try. I drove to my parents' house on a Saturday morning, armed with a neatly printed business proposal, complete with projected earnings and a notarized course acceptance letter. I even planned how I would pay them back, with interest. I found them sitting in the sunroom reviewing blueprints, not for a new home, but for a pointless, expensive meditation pod Ethan wanted to install in the back of his failing coffee shop. I cleared my throat. Mom, Dad? Can I have a minute? It's important. They both looked up annoyed. Ethan was there too, sprawled on the couch, reading a book about sustainable sourcing that he probably wouldn't finish. I presented my case quickly, professionally. I kept the emotion out of my voice. I have a huge opportunity, a management role, but I need a short-term loan, $3,000, for the required training course. I have the papers right here. I'll pay it back within 6 months. My father didn't even look at the documents. He looked at Ethan, then back at me, frowning like I was asking for the moon. Jenna, we simply don't have that kind of liquid capital right now, he said, his voice flat. We just authorized a rather large expense for Ethan's new pod. It's an integral part of his brand evolution. Brand evolution? I felt the heat rising in my chest. Dad, he's installing a nap space for hipsters when he can't pay his utility bill. I'm talking about a guaranteed path to financial independence, a real future. $3,000 is less than a month's loss at that coffee shop. My mother sighed, putting her hand on my father's arm. Darling, we admire your realism, but we can't keep solving your problems for you. Ethan is taking risks. He's chasing a vision. You need to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Then my father delivered the knockout blow, the sentence that vaporized any lingering loyalty I had. He looked at me with genuine disappointment and said, if you had worked as hard and as creatively as Ethan has, you wouldn't need to be begging for a loan. You need to think bigger, Jenna, not just about paying bills. I heard a small involuntary gasp escape my throat. Hard as Ethan? Creatively? Ethan was sitting right there listening, a faint, smug smile playing on his lips, enjoying the performance of my dismissal. He was the one who took my savings, and they were telling me I hadn't worked hard enough. I stood up slowly, folding the papers with unnerving calm. The silence in the room was deafening, the kind of silence after a pane of glass shatters. I understand, I said, my voice low and steady. It was the hardest thing I'd ever said. I understand completely. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I walked out of that room, got in my car, and drove straight to the Conscious Cup. I wrote a 2-sentence resignation letter, left it on the register, and dropped my uniform in the dumpster outside. Then I drove home. I took out my phone, blocked my parents' numbers, blocked Ethan's number, and deleted all their social media contacts. The silence in my phone was immediate, blissful. They had made their choice, vision over reality, family over fairness, and that gave me the clarity I needed. I secured a high-interest cash advance to cover the $3,000, a bitter pill, but a necessary one. I finished the training, aced the interview, and got the job. As I started my new life, watching the sun rise over the city skyline, a new mantra formed in my mind. They call me the practical one? Fine. I will use that practicality to crush their vision. I will use reality to eliminate their fantasy. The debt, the rejection, the sheer audacity of their betrayal, it became my fuel. They had pushed me out, and now I was an enemy, a calculated force heading straight for Ethan's little shop of failures. There was no going back. The only way forward was through him. The day I blocked their numbers was the day the noise stopped. The self-doubt, the emotional tug-of-war, the constant comparison, it all vanished. The quiet was intoxicating. It allowed me to hear my own mind, and what my mind was saying was pure strategy. They wanted to call me the practical, boring one? Fine. I would be the most practical person they had ever encountered. The training course was a blur of caffeine and code. I wasn't just learning digital marketing, I was learning the architecture of modern wealth. I worked my corporate job during the day, where I quickly excelled, and spent my evenings and weekends building my escape vehicle. I needed a business that was the inverse of Ethan's failure. He was all about grand ideas and zero execution. I would be zero ideas and total execution. He had chosen high-priced, locally sourced social commentary. I chose efficiency, quality, and scale. My niche? Coffee for the relentless, the no-nonsense consumer. No abstract art, no political posturing, no expensive, uncomfortable furniture. Just high-quality, sustainably sourced beans that tasted amazing and arrived quickly. I called the brand The Grind. It wasn't a movement, it was a promise, it was about results. I started small. A white label product, a clean website, and a razor-sharp digital marketing campaign, targeting people who typed phrases like best coffee for working from home or fast delivery coffee. Ethan was spending thousands on abstract poetry murals. I was spending $50 a day on targeted Google ads. The difference was immediate and staggering. My first sale was from a woman in Ohio who said in her review, "It just works. It's exactly what I need to get my day started. Thank you for not asking me to solve the world's problems before 9 a.m." That was the thesis. My business grew by capitalizing on the very simplicity Ethan had scorned. While his decolonized blend sat unsold on a dusty shelf, I was moving hundreds of units of the Clarity Blend and the Focus Roast a week. My operation was lean, entirely online, and scalable. No rent, no pretentious employees, no $20,000 meditation pod. Just pure, unadulterated profit margins. It was my personal validation. Every new order was a silent, defiant "fuck you" to my father's condescending lecture. The $3,000 loan was repaid within 4 months. The student loan debt was shrinking faster than I had ever dared to dream. I kept tabs on Ethan, of course. Not through my own phone, but through anonymous searches and an old burner social media account. I watched the reviews for the Conscious Cup plunge into the abyss. $7 for a bitter cup, and the barista looked annoyed that I ordered a sugar. The whole place feels like a guilt trip. Gave it 3 tries, but I'm going back to Starbucks. The writing was on the wall, but Ethan and my parents were illiterate. They were sinking, and fast. I heard through a distant family friend that the landlord of the commercial building housing the Conscious Cup, a tough old-school guy named Mr. Harrison, was getting impatient. Ethan was constantly late on his high-dollar commercial rent. He had leveraged everything, including more loans backed by my naive parents, and now the well was dry. One evening, staring at my rapidly escalating profit projections, profits that dwarfed the $100,000 taken from me, I saw the opportunity. The perfect, elegant, poetic opportunity for revenge. It wasn't enough to be successful while he failed. That was too passive. I had to orchestrate the failure. I had to be the one to lower the boom. I put in a call to a corporate lawyer, a specialist in commercial real estate buyouts. I gave him a clear, non-negotiable instruction. I want to purchase the remainder of the lease agreement for the Conscious Cup's location. I want to buy all the equipment and fixtures attached to the current tenant, and you are to do this through an LLC with zero connection to the name Jenna or my family. Not one word gets out until the paperwork is signed. The lawyer was amused. "A hostile takeover of a coffee shop, miss?" "No," I corrected him, the ice in my voice surprising even myself. "A hostile takeover of an illusion. And I want the keys handed to me on the day they are evicted." This wasn't about money anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about sending a clear, undeniable message to my family about the difference between a real businesswoman and a perpetual child with a good soundbite. Ethan stole my foundation. I was about to buy his entire future and convert it into my flagship store. The game was in the end game, and I held all the cards. I was no longer the pawn. I was the queen. And I was about to checkmate the golden child. The final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, like the tumbler in a safe. It took 6 weeks of aggressive, strategic negotiation through the shell corporation my lawyer had established. Mr. Harrison, the landlord, didn't care about the Conscious Cup's vision. He cared about the missing rent payments. He loved my lawyer's offer, a premium price for the remainder of Ethan's highly leveraged, money-losing lease, along with an all-cash offer for the fixtures and equipment. It was a clean slate for him. It was a death sentence for my brother. The eviction date was set for a Friday. Ethan and my parents, still blissfully unaware, had been summoned to a final investment review meeting with Mr. Harrison, who, in a rare moment of corporate courtesy, wanted to deliver the news in person. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. right in the back office of the doomed coffee shop. I arrived at 9:55 a.m. I didn't drive my usual reliable, slightly battered sedan. I pulled up in the new car I'd bought with my own profits, a sleek, dark German model that whispered success, not begged for it. I wore a tailored black suit that felt less like clothing and more like armor. I looked nothing like the dependable cashier they had last seen. I looked like the person who writes the checks. I walked through the nearly empty cafe. Ethan had stopped trying. The tables were dirty, the mood board was peeling, and the air smelled stale. I felt nothing but cold, clinical satisfaction. I walked past the decolonized blend beans, the ones that cost me $100,000, and pushed open the door to the office. Ethan, Mom, and Dad were already seated, their faces a mixture of strained optimism and deep fatigue. Ethan looked thinner, his hair messy, the arrogance finally receding under a flood of stress. My parents looked hopeful, perhaps expecting Mr. Harrison to announce a new investor. They hadn't seen me in months. When I walked in, their faces froze. It wasn't just surprise, it was total visceral shock, as if a ghost had materialized in the fluorescent light. "Jenna?" My mother whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. My father just stared. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. Ethan's eyes, those arrogant golden eyes, were wide and disbelieving. I didn't acknowledge them. I walked over to the table and extended my hand to Mr. Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate your cooperation. Thank you for setting this up." "My pleasure, Ms. Carter," Mr. Harrison said, his voice loud and clear, shaking my hand firmly. "Carter." My last name. My father's last name. The name they thought I had dishonored by being just practical. I took the empty seat opposite my family. Their confusion was delicious. "Jenna, what are you doing here?" Ethan finally managed, his voice thin. "Did Mom call you? We're having a private business meeting." I smiled, a thin, cold crescent moon of a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Oh, Ethan, this is my business meeting." I turned to Mr. Harrison, who was thoroughly enjoying the spectacle. "Mr. Harrison, I believe the documents are ready." He slid a thick folder across the table to my father. "Mr. Carter, your son's lease is in default. The termination clause has been triggered." He then gestured toward me. "My new tenant, acting through her legal firm, has purchased the remaining term of the lease. All fixtures and equipment are now her property, per the terms of the agreement your son signed." My father fumbled with the papers. He was seeing his investment, all the bailouts, all the denial, evaporate in black ink. "Purchased?" Ethan sputtered, his face turning an unhealthy shade of purple. "You can't do that. Who is she?" I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the mahogany table. The click of my watch against the wood was the only sound. "She is me, Ethan," I said, my voice low, a controlled hum of vengeance. "The legal entity that now owns this lease, this coffee equipment, and your entire vision is me." My mother choked on a breath. My father dropped the papers. Ethan stood up, scattering his chair backward. You were the one? You took the space? You knew we were struggling?" "Struggling is a generous term for what you were doing, Ethan. You were hemorrhaging money and lying to Mom and Dad about the severity of it," I retorted, my eyes boring into his. "You took my $100,000 to chase a vision. I took the reality you built, which is this failed storefront, and I bought it." I stood up, adjusting the lapels of my suit. It was the absolute ultimate payoff. The moment of cold, hard justice. "You took my seed money, Ethan, because you thought my future was less important than your vanity," I finished, delivering the final line I'd been rehearsing for 2 years. "You called your business the Conscious Cup. I call mine the Grind. And you, Ethan, are now officially fired. Get your things out by 5 p.m. I'll send a moving crew for the meditation pod." I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing left to say. I had not only demanded my money back, I had taken the most valuable thing he possessed, the only thing he ever truly owned, his place in the family narrative. I had bought his defeat. I walked out, leaving the golden child and his enablers sitting in the ruins of their shared illusion. The victory tasted sweeter than any $6 artisanal coffee. It tasted like freedom. The silence that followed the takeover wasn't quiet. It was deafening. It was the sound of a family's carefully constructed narrative shattering. I didn't stick around to witness the immediate aftermath, but I didn't need to. I saw the results. Within hours, the remnants of the conscious cup, the ugly wooden stools, the illegible menu boards, the abstract pretentious murals were being hauled away by a moving crew I hired. We kept the espresso machine and the lease. Everything else was trash. My phone, once a blissful void, began to light up. Missed calls and frantic rambling voicemails from my parents. They weren't calls of apology or regret. They were calls of panic and outrage. "Jenna, how could you do this to your own brother?" My mother pleaded in one message, her voice shaking. "He's devastated. Where is your compassion? This is not who we raised you to be." Compassion? I deleted the message. They had zero compassion when I begged them for $3,000 to save my life. They only cared about compassion when the loss was their own. My father's messages were colder, more damning. "You won, Jenna. You proved your point. Now be the adult and give the lease back to Ethan. We'll help you pay the money back. Don't ruin his life over a mistake." A mistake? They still couldn't call it what it was, betrayal. They still couldn't accept that the practical, boring daughter had the power to undo the visionary son. They tried every manipulation tactic in the book: guilt, appeals to family loyalty, and even vague threats about cutting me out completely, as if they hadn't already. I never replied. I held the boundary firm, no contact. The transformation of the old storefront was swift and therapeutic. We gutted the space. The harsh colors were replaced with clean whites and calming woods. The meditation pod became a fully functional, highly efficient shipping and fulfillment station for my booming online business. The new sign, in bold, no-nonsense lettering, read, "The grind, fuel your reality." It wasn't a coffee shop. It was the flagship office and showroom for my empire. I kept on two of the old baristas, the ones who had genuinely worked hard and whom Ethan had consistently treated like disposable props. They were thrilled. They got raises, benefits, and a boss who valued their actual labor, not their capacity to feign enlightenment. The ultimate surprising resolution came 6 months later. I was in my new office, the one where the manager's chair used to sit, reviewing inventory. The door to the main area opened and one of my employees hesitantly knocked. "Jenna, there's someone here to see you. He says it's important." It was Ethan. He looked humbled, aged, and finally genuinely defeated. He was working a terrible job in data entry, paying off debt he'd accumulated while chasing his dream. He stood in my workspace, surrounded by the tangible evidence of my success. The irony wasn't lost on him. He didn't launch into a tirade. He didn't try to negotiate. He simply said, "I just wanted to say, you were right, Jen, all of it. I was a selfish idiot. I took your safety and I blew it on a fantasy. And you took a $3,000 loan and turned it into this. You are the smart one, and I'm sorry, truly sorry." It wasn't a tearful apology, but it was honest. It was real. And in that moment, I realized the revenge was complete. He didn't just lose his business. He lost the golden delusion his parents had fed him his entire life. I looked at him, not with malice, but with a quiet understanding. Apology accepted, Ethan. Now I have a company to run. I still keep my distance from my parents, maintaining a cordial but strictly limited relationship. They still don't fully understand that I didn't ruin their son. I simply allowed his own irresponsibility to do the job, and then I bought the wreckage. I never used that $100,000 to buy a house. I used it to buy something far more valuable: my self-respect, my independence, and the future they tried to deny me. Sometimes, the only way to truly win against the people who betray you isn't to be cruel, but to be unequivocally, undeniably successful on your own terms. That $100,000 became my ultimate tuition, a tuition that taught me that your family's validation means nothing if you don't validate yourself first. If this story of betrayal, ambition, and the sweet taste of earned success resonated with you, if you've ever felt like the black sheep who finally turned the tables, then you're part of the grind community. Tell me in the comments below, what's one thing you had to lose before you finally realized your own strength? Let me know your thoughts on how Jenna handled the ultimate payoff. And if you want more stories about the hidden power plays and family secrets that happen behind closed doors, give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a little motivation to fight for their own future. Your support helps bring the real stories of redemption and revenge to light. Thank you for watching.